That's the number one thing we're getting all wrong with AI right now is that we are so focused on speed that we forget that we need results. And the result that you need is absolute humanity. You need people to show up with their full energy, and that means being themselves and having that goodness. And no one is going to have a full tank without ever being told they're good.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15Five. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. Hi, I'm Karina Young, VP of People at 15Five, and you're joining me on today's HR Superstars podcast. Uncertainty comes with a job in HR. Reorgs, messy manager moments, shifting priorities, AI shifts, and the pressure to communicate clearly when the truth is often still unfolding. But today, I'm joined by Kat Kibben, founder of 3 Ears Media and recruiting expert who helps teams build more human-centered hiring practices and talks about practical ways to lead when the ground keeps moving underneath us. From lessons learned living in a van to the reality of being the HR police in tough moments, we're going to break down how trust gets built through reactions, not perfection. So let's get started. Kat, welcome to HR Superstars. It's such a pleasure to have you. Can you give me the movie trailer version of your life and how you got to where you are now?
Why do I feel really compelled to be like, and there was Kat Kibben?
I've been waiting for someone to do that. So you can be that person.
I win. No, so my name is Kat Kibben. Like you said, I run a company called 3 Ears Media, and it is named after 2 dogs with 4 ears. And I guess if I were doing like the movie version of my life, I think this chapter of my story starts with a manager who is really struggling to navigate uncertainty confidently, and it turned into toxicity. And so I left that role and decided to start my own business. And I've been in the world of recruiting now for over 15 years, which makes me feel really old. I have lived and worked long enough in this industry to earn a couple of scars and a couple of lessons learned that I've been grateful and really lucky enough to be able to translate into a business where, like you mentioned, I'm helping make hiring more human. So I'm teaching teams about what they do best, understanding what machines do best, and how we can collaborate together to create an experience that's actually an improvement on the baseline where we sit today.
I love that, Kat. Let's start with a little bit of this idea of uncertainty. Why do you think uncertainty always makes its way first to HR's desk before anyone else's?
Because we have that H in front that says that we have to deal with humans, and humans are not good at uncertainty, right? And I always say that like with a big virtual hug. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm good at, it's okay to be a little defensive. I think it's actually organic and it's really built into our nervous systems to be miswired for uncertainty. I joke that the caveman that ran when you heard a little snap under the bush, those are our ancestors. The people who didn't run don't have ancestors, right? If that gives an idea of what our nervous systems are wired to do when it comes to uncertainty. And then we put people in positions where they think the job is to just follow through on a policy, but they actually become the center of uncertainty. And I find that that's often where people struggle the most in the HR role, is because we have the human in the role, but we're never taught how to navigate uncertainty confidently.
Well, there's this unspoken assumption that HR can somehow do it better or differently, right? But thinking about what you just said and the way we're wired, like none of us were really wired to navigate uncertainty with calm, clarity, confidence, and all the attributes we post up on a LinkedIn job profile for HR leaders. We were actually meant to be like, that looks terrifying. I will go the other direction. Yep. And in some ways, it's just so unnatural. But the world we live in, like, is begging us to navigate uncertainty all the time. There's an interesting, just like that underlying wiring and where it's pulling us.
Well, and it's really interesting to me how that pattern plays out at scale. And I know you're going, every person listening to this, if you are an HR leader, you're going to see this pattern is, so our reaction to uncertainty is, and every single human does this, is we make rules to compensate and make sure that next time this doesn't happen. That's kind of the pattern. And unfortunately, those rules don't always serve us. And I think it actually serves us a lot more, especially right now, to question the rules, especially the ones that don't help anyone.
That's an interesting way to think about it and to think about that policy creation, right? How do we get rid and mitigate that uncertainty and not have it be in our life? Be able to find like a repeated outcome. Can I get a guaranteed outcome more oftentimes than not? I love that thinking. And I mean, we could go down 10,000 tangents with this. Let's tell me like a little bit about what you think on what makes HR's position in particular uniquely difficult when it comes to things that are unclear, not well written, not well defined.
It has a lot to do with how we are trained to do the job in the first place. And I think if you take that 10,000-foot view of HR, you realize pretty quickly that there's not one path into that role. And that means that we have a lot of different people with a lot of different titles and completely different skills. And unfortunately, when that happens, we have this group of people who are all just trying to figure out something that they weren't trained to do. And that makes us policy police. And I'm thinking about someone that I coach right now, right? So literally her job is HR in a very large hospital network. And that means that she goes and sits through uncomfortable conversations. That's the job. Someone wants to have a conversation with HR. She goes, she sits in the room, she has the conversation. And it's fascinating to me, like the mindset of going in there, because she does what we all do, which is I want to get it right. I want to do the right thing. I want to be successful. I want to be good at my job. But the reality is that when you are navigating uncertainty, when you're navigating the unknown, if you are so attached to doing it right, it's the easiest path to doing it wrong.
Do you think there is a right path when it comes to uncertainty?
I think that we have to build resilience. And I actually, so it's not so much the seeking out the right path. And this is where I think people need to be retrained. It's not seeking out the right path. It's seeking out tools that always work when we are facing uncertainty, because uncertainty is very predictable, meaning it's going to happen, right? But we don't often take a step back to say what worked during this uncertain time. How can I reapply that to every day so that that muscle builds and I'm able to perform when I'm going, oh, snap, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I think about that in particular for HR, right? Because it's this person that you're coaching, I imagine that they have that relationship with those employees who I need to have a conversation with HR. I've got to talk to them. But they also sit between the leaders above them who are like, well, what is happening here? The business decisions that need to move forward. That's a really interesting tension that HR is in between and trying to build trust with people on all sides. What have you seen around that? What comes to mind for you with that?
So the research shows that trust is disintegrating at work across every category. So I actually
That's shocking. I wouldn't have known that.
This is what's more shocking is that in 2020, we had the chance to do it right. So in 2020, we had an entire workforce that got parallel trauma. We went through a parallel experience. I'm not saying the trauma was the same for everyone, but we all went through something together. And that's never really happened in the workforce before 2020. And I, from a psychological perspective, a researcher, someone who's worked with lots of teams, I thought to myself, this is our moment. Like, this is our moment where we can change things because we actually have access and power to change. Great example, remote work. Before that, I did not think the level of remote work we have today was possible. And overnight, it became reality, not just possible, but the true reality of the workforce. And when that much is shifting, that means we could have changed the emotional relationship. We could have changed the relationship between people and work. And what we did instead is we gave people all the trust and then we took it back. And that's never going to empower HR to be a impactful leader inside of a business, because it's going to be really hard to get the trust back. Over the last 5 years, I looked at a series of metrics, because I'm a nerd, and looked at all these dynamics of trust. Do I trust my manager to talk about mental health? Do I trust my manager to tell them about something that's happening in my life? Just those kinds of conversations. And since 2020, when they do a comparative analysis to 2024, most every metric I saw was down by a quarter. So 25 to 50% decrease over the last 4 to 6 years.
Wow. I mean, that's huge.
That's a problem.
That's huge. Tell me, how do you see that problem playing out for HR? What's the big risk of not solving that problem?
It goes across a lot of dynamics because you have to remember that this mistrust doesn't just exist at the bottom. It exists at the top too. And you're simultaneously having a conversation about who AI replaces, how we create a strategic workforce without humans. That's a conversation that's happening in really big companies right now. Whether it's going to be successful or not, different conversation. We're talking about how it plays out for HR. And I feel like with this disintegration of trust, it fundamentally changes the HR role in the next 2 to 5 years. And what I mean by that is for anyone who considers themselves a task rabbit or order taker right now, who's getting treated like they're just part of a system where, you have to crank that button to get the output that you want, your job is more at risk than it has ever been. And that's not a taunting or a fear tactic. That's a reality check. And it's a consequence of the mistrust that exists now. And my encouragement to everyone would be to highly invest in the skills that make you better than a machine. That means empathy. That means challenging. That means being able to point out different scenarios and make recommendations. We have to upskill into consulting level skills regularly, or the consequence is going to be an HR that looks a lot more like a payroll system where you click, 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 and it does the thing.
Well, and there's so many people who are in HR now, even though you're talking about, right? One, the HR world is filled with people from different backgrounds, different professions. Like we all come in a different way. But part of what gets people into the profession is that they're the doers. There's the getting things done. There's the, I can trust Kat. I give this to Kat. They're going to knock it out. No problem. No big deal. But that's actually no longer your biggest value add. And I think especially for a lot of us who've been in the profession for a while, it's a bit of an identity crisis of, oh, so wait, like, what is my value? And I say that because I believe most HR leaders have so much more value to offer than that. We're just not always seeing it and naming it and recognizing it. But we actually have to just take time to be like, to what you were just saying, Kat, like, what is the thing that I do that actually pushes leaders forward? Well, it's that I can have a real conversation. I can triangulate data across the company. I can be strategic about our people and our business together. I can do things that are tailored to my leaders and my culture and my organization in a way any like AI tool cannot. But my value is not, I punched out a spreadsheet in 30 minutes.
I also think there's a social dynamic here that is worth talking about, which is the fact that the majority of the HR field is made up by women who were socialized as women in the world. And what I've learned as a non-binary person existing in this world who was very clearly identified as a woman and now is often misgendered as a man is that sometimes what men do without thinking, women do for survival. And
say more about that.
Men don't think about challenging other men. They don't think about pointing and laughing at a problem or saying, that's not going to work. We're not doing that. Right? Because they were socialized in a world in which their energy was dominant. It was treated as dominant. And they were often given space that other people of many different dimensions don't get. And I have seen it play out in real time, where as a consultant today, I can challenge in a way that other people in the room cannot, even if they have the experience I do, even if they have the background I do. And I just really want to encourage people. My point here is not, you don't need to agree with me about gender politics or whatever route you want to call that. It is a reality that I have experienced in my real life. I am simply speaking of my experience. And I think it is a reality that women need to address personally, and something that they really need to work on is their discomfort around things that socially they were told not to do. Those will be mandated of us in the next chapter because they are what make us human and what make us valuable.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest examples of this I see consistently, and I'm sure you do too, is in negotiations. The number of peers in my network who are majority, like identify as women, who text me and are like, I'm in a job offer and what should I say? How should I approach it? I'm in a review cycle and I want to talk about my comp or a promotion and like, give me 5 talking points. And I have to remind them, like, the fact that you even called me to ask, one, I love, like, appreciative. I'm appreciative that you trust me, but you know that your male counterparts aren't even doing that. Like, they're just going in oftentimes with the assumption that, well, I've earned it and I've done it. And so I'm very comfortable saying, these are my achievements and these are what I think, and not worried about, well, what's the perception going to be of me if the decision's no? Right.
Yes.
And that is often, and I'll say from my experience, my mind has gone there a lot of like, how do I navigate this end perception to what we were even talking about earlier with policy? Like, how do I make sure this end thing doesn't happen instead of actually just having better tools, better resources to enter a situation that is uncertain with a
Yes.
level of confidence and not shame or guilt about it?
We have to act with conviction instead of convincing. Conviction over
Yes.
convincing. That is how the role shifts ultimately. We are not just business case makers. We are people with conviction who know our business, know how systems work, and know what to expect from people and how to navigate.
Oh, yeah, completely. I love that you use that word convincing because very recently I was having a coaching session with ChatGPT about a skill that I'm working on building. And I was like, talking to chat and I was like, man, like what, like I am held up by something here that I cannot figure out. And chat came back with a real mind blower and was like, you don't need to convince anyone of your expertise. And I was like, oh, that was like very deep for this one moment. Like I didn't think we were going to go there, but that was one of my reminders is that you don't need to convince anyone. Like that's actually not the primary purpose of your job.
Exactly.
Because if
Exactly.
that's how I feel about it and that's how I approach it, like I will become obsolete. Like it's important to have that self-awareness of like, this skill is not serving me. I don't know that it ever really served me. I thought it did at a certain point in my career in my life, but it certainly doesn't now. And it certainly won't in the world of AI and really just an uncertain workplace and workforce, what things are going to look like. Our ability to predict what HR is going to look like, even in a year, 2 or 3, is just constantly shifting and changing. And you were talking earlier, Kat, about being able to have that resilience, like come with the right skills. Tell me more what you mean by that.
Yeah.
What do you think is that prep work HR really needs to focus on?
That actually is the topic that I took on in my book because I learned this in the most unconventional way you could possibly do it. I decided to sell everything I own and move into a van and travel and run my business for 3 years. I don't necessarily recommend that route unless you're particularly adventurous, you really like cold toilet seats, and you don't mind being woken up by rain in the middle of the night. That sounds like you live inside of a tin can. Ultimately, what I found is like it's really practical and simple, but you have to do it all the time. It's things like asking for help. So, when I went into van life, I thought it was the adventure and autonomy, right? I'm going out on the out by on the road by myself. And the reality is I had to rely on people more than ever. And then when you get into the workforce data around asking for help, only 41% of people can remember the last time they asked for help. And that one doesn't shock me as much as when you flip it. That means 59% of people don't remember asking for help. And if the majority of your workforce never taps into the resources that are around them, if they never tap into that collaboration and all those things that you put on the wall about your deep values, are you living your values? So if you're an HR leader and you're like, I ask for help. Yeah, but do you teach your team how? So one of the ways you can do that is create 10-minute hot seats at the end of every team meeting. That 10-minute hot seat, you assign the hot seat. So this week is Kat's hot seat. Next week is Karina's hot seat. And at the end, they can bring one question and the team, everyone puts their phones down. They 100% focus on trying to solve that problem with that person. And if you want to see a team that's extra prepared to bounce back from something bad happening, catch that team, right? Catch the team who knows everyone else's strengths, who knows exactly who can help them with that, who's willing to tap 2 brains instead of 1. Those are the teams that are going to be successful. And it seems so simple. Really common sense things that if you just do it over and over again and you model it, it changes everything.
Oh, completely. I mean, you think about like even for HR, right? Like we espouse, right, collaboration and communication and all of these things, but oftentimes we are a 1 to 2 person show solving things on our own. And we feel like, well, I've got to stay in my own little cube over here. I have to be the problem solver. I've got to take it on. But nobody solves anything in life completely alone. To your point in the van, like even when you were alone in a van in a time where the world was isolating, you still needed people around you to help you, to support you. Like we're not meant, like going back to our ancestors, to be totally isolated. I think there's comfort in knowing like we don't have to overcomplicate this problem.
Right.
Like uncertainty, it doesn't have to be so complex. Just like lean on others, ask for help. And that's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that you're missing a skill or a competency. And sometimes I feel, even to come back to what we were talking about AI, that's where people get so stuck, is they're like, well, I need to show that I can do everything like on my own, like solo as a person. I don't need AI in any part of my life. And it's like, well, why don't you actually just show that you could work better? There's like a better version of you that AI could help unlock. Like you're not in competition, but it's just so deeply rooted in us.
Right. It's also, here's another rule that does not serve us. If they hire me, I have to know all the answers. If I'm the boss, I have to know the answer. If people come to me, and that's how we get a lot of people espousing things that are not true and are not real, or really bad feedback. That's another cycle that I see repeated over and over again, is we promote our top performers. We put them at a top of a team with absolutely no people management skills. And then all of a sudden we have these toxic leaders because they were not given the skills to lead people. And we can't keep making that assumption. 97% of people have had a toxic manager or described their workplace as toxic.
Oh, yeah. 97. I bet any single person listening to this, there's one person that comes to your mind. One work situation you can just think of immediately. That one. Yeah. And one, if you're lucky. Yeah. For some of us, I can go back of like, oh, okay, that it's sprinkled. There's this, and even in the best of companies, it can happen because we are humans, right? Humans make poor choices. They have bad behaviors. And when you put enough humans together, the likelihood you're going to get someone who does something off kilter is pretty high.
Yeah.
It is certainly there.
Employee engagement is the ultimate driver of your organization's performance. So it's one thing to measure it, but 15Five's performance management platform helps you maximize engagement with easy, customized surveys that transform your data into guided actions with clear results. Learn more at 15five.com or click the link in the show notes.
Well, and it's the only path to make more money is to lead people, even if you're not good at it. The singular path in the majority of corporate America is you have to lead people in order to get to the next level, to hit the next income bracket and whatever. And making more money should not be your incentive for leading other people.
No, not at all. To what you're saying about putting people into leadership positions with no experience who thrive in a independent contributor role, to make them a leader of multiple people can be quite dangerous. Like you just don't know the effect that they're going to have on someone. And that has a lasting impact on someone's career and their perception of your company, your work. But that decision just isn't treated with a thoughtfulness or care. But I would say the uncertainty level of their success is really high. And we just toss people in there and are like, this will work out.
Right?
This will be fine.
And that's the easiest way to push someone right towards the door. I was that kid. At 28, I got promoted to VP of marketing. All of a sudden, I went from individual contributor, really good at writing. That's what I've always been good at, to leader of 6. And I was miserable. I was so miserable. It actually changed my entire career path from there. From that point forward, I did no title hunting, right? I could not care what my title was. I distinctly sought out jobs where I could do the work I wanted to do and make the money I wanted to make with as little people management as possible, because that experience was so bad that I actually thought that I just couldn't be a decent people leader, that I just wasn't good at it. That was a skill I did not have. I needed to go and do something else. I mean, left the industry, left the field, like it was that bad of an experience.
So how did you get brave enough to dip your toe back in the pool of leadership?
By force, as usual. I think that's the nature of whatever you believe is divine, whether it's science or something in between. I feel like I was meant to be a manager at some point, if only to heal those wounds that I had in the first place. And it wasn't until I was running my own business. But I also have to say that, like, it didn't come easily to me. I hired a lot of people who I fired within 6 months. And I'm a job post writing expert, so that's kind of embarrassing to like say out loud, like, I hired the wrong people. I hired the wrong skills. But the reality is, like, hiring is really hard. Leading people is really hard. But the hardest part is healing the parts of yourself that do not serve your ability to serve others, and recognizing when the real problem is you.
I imagine too, those moments of uncertainty, also the first reaction you're going to get from yourself is potentially that unhealed, untaken care of, that like deep guttural reaction. It's not the like, this is coming from a place of intelligence, calm, caring, compassion, like values driven. It's just what we talk about at 15.5 is like that below the line behavior.
Yes.
Like that it just shoots you down into there. And I know you've talked before about how van life also taught you a little bit about leadership under pressure. Tell me more about that.
I think it made me realize how few time-sensitive problems we are dealing with. And what you just touched on is, if you address everything like a time-sensitive problem, that first version of you is the only person who gets to show up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this applies to everything in life, because in the van, there were times when I just didn't have internet. I did not have power. There were times when I was over 100 miles from the closest grocery store. And ultimately what it did is it helped me create that reality, because we always say, oh, it's no rush, but it kind of is, because we have these weird rules around speed and time and all of these things. And living in the van made me realize what was a priority and what wasn't, because I always had time for the things that were priorities. And it also helped me contextualize that with my team. You'll always have time for things that are priorities. So number one thing I needed to start doing, communicate priorities. Have goal setting meetings with every person on my team, even if they're a contractor, because we all have to win. We all got to feel like we're winning, or nobody is going to do their best work. If you just feel like you're grinding and you never are like, yeah, I did pretty good at that, right? And so I think that was the biggest lesson, is like, your problems are not time sensitive. And if you aren't prepared to show up for that conversation, push it off a couple hours, do it tomorrow. Like, nothing bad's going to happen if you show up as your best self, but I could almost guarantee the alternative, something not great, is going to come from that.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting, even having priorities, goals, whatever it is to work on is like a tool to combat uncertainty, because I know I can enter my day saying, I definitely have to complete. I literally just did this before we started having this conversation on this paper. I'm such a writer on like real paper, but like I have this list of things and I put a star next to the ones that absolutely must get done today. Like there is no ifs, ands, or buts. And even just taking a minute to do that, I was like, oh, great. I can stop thinking about this other bullet on the list that is for some reason like scratching my mind, but does not need me today.
Yes. Again,
but I'll come back to it tomorrow.
And you are hitting on another one of those rules that do not serve us. I need to be busy. I just need to finish the list. That rule does not serve anyone. I speak as a recovering workaholic, right? I was the kid who thought I couldn't go home until I had fewer than 10 unread emails in my 20s, okay? A lot of 11:30 p.m. nights. That did not need to happen, right? But we never communicate that to our team. We just let them absorb all of these weird rules around what success means, what it looks like, and build all this like osmosis leadership. And most of that is awful. It is toxic hustle culture crap that really hurts us and just creates this sustained burnout that, again, that is not going to prepare you for the future of work. I have no idea what the future of work looks like. I don't even pretend to have a good hypothesis. I just use data. And I will say 100%, if you are burnt out to the crisp, there is no world in which you survive that.
No way, not at all. And it's just so interesting that like, just give yourself clarity, give yourself space to like get really clear on what do I need to get done? When do I need to do it? But sometimes it feels like we get addicted to like the adrenaline of chaos. But when I say we, I mean me. I mean, this is a personal problem that I've been working through myself, but it is that like, oh, if I know how to, again, like coming back to like, how were you raised? What were you rewarded? What behaviors you were rewarded for? Did people give you the right signals that you felt I need to do this? For me, it was mitigate chaos, like learn how to navigate it. And that is like not the thing that actually creates long-term success in the workforce, in personal life also too. Like, but they're just these bad habits. And sometimes you just got to like let it go. At a certain point in your life, you have got to address them and be willing to change.
Because nothing changes if you don't change. I think that was really like the core lesson after van life is like, I went into van life because I felt like I did all the things. I had the pretty view. I could see the Rockies from my porch. I had a successful business. I had like I did all the things and I still didn't feel right. And the reality is it was because I tried to change everything around me instead of just changing myself. And often the problem that you feel like is so repetitive and comes up all the time. It's something inside of you that has to change, not the other thing. That blame takes up so much room, especially for HR people. And I know just like anybody from any background, like we're humans. We're trying to blame something. We don't want to be wrong. It's really okay for you to take some module of this and figure out what you can change about it.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of times in a week that I see a question from an HR leader or an admin or a manager, which is like, how do I deal with a difficult leader? I think about like the frequency in which I see that question. And I'm like, I bet you know the answer because I'm sure other people in your company are asking you this. It's just things like that where it's like, well, like, what are you doing to enable this dynamic? Which doesn't maybe feel good to reflect on in the moment because when we have someone who we're like, they're toxic, they're the problem, usually we're like angelic, perfect, I've got nothing to work on. But when I think about just some of those most toxic leaders I worked for, I was a part of that dynamic. I let some of that happen without setting boundaries, without saying, I'm going to remove myself from this situation. I don't need to continue to show up here. And that's also a smoothing over. There are definitely reasons why people can't leave, can't walk out. I see and respect that. I get it. But think about, where do you have control? Where do you have autonomy to just improve the thing that you're doing for yourself? Because to what you were just saying, Kat, like if you just start making one little personal change, one at a time, just work on something every day, a little bit. It's amazing how the world around you and your perception of it really shifts. I guess maybe it's really more the perception of the world than the actual world around you, because everyone's going to keep doing their nonsense all the time. But how you feel and react to it is going to become very different.
Absolutely. And, I have 2 little exercises that I do whenever I'm dealing with somebody difficult that might be helpful. The first one is that when the thing comes up, I ask myself, when was the first time I felt this feeling? And I really try to just like sit with myself for a minute and let my brain go back to that memory. Because so often if something inside of you is like, eek, so bad that you're willing to like go on a message board and talk to the internet and admit you have problems, like this isn't the first time. I can almost guarantee it is not the first time that you felt that. And often the problem lies with whatever seed was planted the first time. And so if you can go back to that first feeling, even if you could just take 1 minute at your desk, remember, no time sensitive problems, just go back to that feeling. When was the first time I felt this? And I like to ask my team that too, when they're really struggling with someone else, because I think it allows us to realize that, like you said, right? It's not 100% them. There's some contribution because every relationship has multiple contributors. That's the inherent in relationship. The other little journal exercise that I feel like I've been preaching lately a lot is whenever I feel activated. And what I mean by activated is I want to scream into a pillow. I want to cuss somebody out. I'm super frustrated, right? Dysregulated is the nice business professional word. I do a journal exercise where I write what I feel, what I need, and what I want. What I feel, what I need, what I want. So feeling is literally, I want to scream in the pillow. I need someone to listen to me, blah, 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 blah. And I want this. And I can almost guarantee you that if you really let yourself have at it on the feelings, the need and want actually will help you clarify the exact language you need for the next hard conversation.
Oh, yeah. I think that's such a brilliant tip and tool. Both of those to use, I think like are absolutely incredible. I will say when you mentioned that first one around when was the first time you felt this, and it is just so much of it is self-reflection. I just like, I love that that's a tool that you use in your coaching with your people.
I think great leadership is a reflection of liking yourself.
That's a mic drop moment.
Like,
yeah.
you have to do the work. I think for a long time, I told myself I could not write a book about leadership because some part of me was like, well, what do I know? You know, like I'm the kid who was the failed boss and then went off to do anything but be a boss for a period of time. And I realized that why I struggled with it is because it's always treated as an external consequence. That leadership is something that just, it's like the magic, the glue or whatever, right? And it never once did I read a book about leadership where they said like, hey, you might be the problem. It's not the perfect template or script. It's actually the fact that you are completely unhealed. And if you don't like yourself, you can't lead people.
That's just such a powerful question, even to reflect on the leaders that we've met in our lives who are great. And I would certainly classify them as people who like themselves and didn't make their personality about disliking others or putting others down. How do you think that's connected, if at all, to why HR leaders struggle to see themselves as leaders?
Because so often they're put into the role of delivering hard messages and having hard conversations that somehow they've internalized that they are not good. I think there's just a lot of things in our society, like capitalism doesn't benefit from us believing that we are inherently good. Our society is built off of a lot of people striving. And ultimately what it's done is created a lot of critics who speak of the things that they aren't capable of doing. And it creates this like culture of yearning. And I know this is like a big philosophical answer for something that could be straightforward, but I think like truly, I think that's at the core of it, is that we don't see ourselves as leaders because there is this element in our society that tells us that we have to constantly be yearning. And so if we were to allow ourselves to be leaders, where do you go from there?
Yeah. What's the next achievement?
Yes. And that's where it has to be about us instead of I. That's where it has to be about something different. And to me, because I was the boss, I was allowed to do this, but I want to give everyone else permission, is that maybe the next achievement is how good could we be? How good could this experience be? How much trust can we build? How can we create the best parts of humanity and feed those so that it makes our business better because the people are better? I have a deep belief that when we make people better, we make them better for their whole lives. We make them better in their community. We make them better partners, parents, friends, children, siblings, all of that. And what better thing to do with your whole life than to allow people, create a space where they get to feel safe enough to be better?
What do you say to HR leaders who struggle to get there because they're worried about being not liked, not respected, not seen as a leader? They have that whatever little voice inside of them is telling them you can't do it.
Yeah. You know, I actually listened to an interview with a mentalist this morning, like one of those magicians that pulls the numbers out of your brain.
I love mentalists. Say less.
Yes.
Got it.
So his name is Oz, and he was interviewed by Adam Grant. So he's like, you know, legit somewhat. And he was talking about confidence. And one of the things, his tip was that you cannot associate the action or the outcomes with self. So we need to separate ourselves from the things that are happening. And if someone blames you, they misguided their anger, right? We need to separate ourselves because that is not about you. It is about humans reacting to stimuli.
Like it is possible to actually have this different perspective because we do tend to take things personally. And I think part of that too is oftentimes just the lack of human recognition and acknowledgement for people in the HR field. One of the things I so appreciate about the leaders I work with today is they will just call me to be like, I really appreciate that you navigated this tough situation. Like, I know that's hard. Thank you for doing that. And then 30 minutes later, you had to get on and record a podcast. Thanks so much for just showing up. I think we have to actually, like, if you are a non-HR leader, but have an HR leader in your company, just go, like, speak to them as a person. Say hi to them, ask them how they're doing, say thank you to, like, thanks for rolling this policy out. I know that I gave you, like, a lot of shit on it, but I actually appreciate that you're doing this work and you're looking out for the company. Yes. Sometimes it's just like, there's a lack of recognition that sometimes fuels these behaviors I see.
Yes. One of the most toxic things we do, right, is making feedback all negative, right? Like, that's the easiest way to set people up to believe that's the only kind of feedback you give too. And that trickles down through entire generations of cultures. And it is so, so powerful. Even if your love language is not words of affirmation, that stuff feels good. Real good.
It does. Well, you know what it is? It's just encouragement. Like, we don't even think about encouraging people around us. I worked for a company once, and their philosophy on interviewing was, my job is to make the interviewer look as good as possible, like to feel as good in this interview as I can, because I want them to be their best. Now, if their best doesn't align with the job, that's fine. But my job is to create an environment where, like, they shine. And that's like a pretty phenomenal way to think about interviewing, where it's oftentimes the opposite of how, with I think most of the times that's not consciously realizing this, is how can I set you up to fail? How do I set you up to find your failure as fast as possible? Yeah. Welcome to American Ninja Warrior. I'm going to see if you can you go across this rope swing over water with like 27 crocodiles. And like, I got to know now if you're going to die or not. It's just like such a different mindset. And the outcome you get is completely different when you are interested in people's goodness, and their humanity, and not in making them feel less than.
Exactly. And I think that's the number one thing we're getting all wrong with AI right now, is that we are so focused on speed that we forget that we need results. And the result that you need is absolute humanity. You need people to be able to show up with their full energy, and that means being themselves and having that goodness. And no one is going to have a full tank without ever being told they're good.
We could probably talk about this and a number of other subjects for the remainder of the day. But as we wrap this up for our listeners, you've dropped so many incredible tips. If there's just one belief about leadership you want HR to walk away with from today, what would it be?
I think the one tip I want them to walk away with is that uncertainty is going to happen, but your team's ability to bounce back is not as dependable. And if you invest in any one skill today, whether it's investing in yourself or the people around you, you need to invest in that ability to start to build your resilience in real time.
I love that. Kat, for all the people who have listened to you and want to learn more about you, van life, what you do at 3 Years Media, where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So of course you can go to 3 Years Media. It's spelled like 3, the number, ears, like the ones on your head, media.com. Or if you just type in Karina Kibben, you will find me. If you spell it right, you get me. If you spell it wrong, you get a priest from the U.S. House of Representatives, and you will know that you were in the wrong place, because I have a shaved head and we do not have the same haircut. You'll notice.
And Kat, tell us, because we heard about your book, but give us the name so if people want to go out and read it. Where can they read more about your van adventures and leadership?
Yes, the book is called The Bounce Back Factor, Liking Yourself While Leading Your People. And you can get a copy of it at bouncebackfactorbook.com.
Amazing. Kat, thank you so much for your wisdom, your humanity, your clarity. And I think that people are going to walk away with just a slew of incredible tips and tricks, but things that are really practical and things that can help them navigate the guaranteed uncertainty in the world.
Thank you.
Thanks. Engaged employees are your most valuable asset. They're innovative, loyal, and committed to achieving exceptional results. By fostering a culture of engagement, you'll unleash their full potential and create a competitive advantage that sets your organization apart. But how do you do it? Check out 15Five's Employee Engagement Playbook linked in the show notes. It explores the undeniable benefits of employee engagement and dives deep into how to measure it. I promise you'll learn actionable strategies to transform engagement insights into measurable outcomes.